The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the bitter cold of the night. Daniel pulled his tattered coat tighter around his shoulders, his breath visible in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. He had been living like this, for years, alone, forgotten, just another face in the crowd that people walked past without a second glance. But tonight would change everything. As he sat on a bench near the park, his fingers numb from the cold, he heard something, a faint cry barely audible over the distant sound of traffic. His heart pounded. Was he imagining it? He stood up, scanning the darkness, and then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 5, shivering in the shadows. Her tiny hands clutched at her thin dress, her eyes wide with fear. Daniel didn't hesitate. He rushed toward her, kneeling down. "Hey, sweetheart, are you lost?" he asked gently. She only sniffled, nodding, her lips trembling too much to speak. Looking around, there was no one else in sight. No parents, no guardians, just her, all alone in the freezing night. Something in him stirred. A memory. His own past. He had once been lost, abandoned. And now, fate had placed this child in front of him. He couldn't walk away. Without a second thought, he took off his coat and wrapped it around her fragile shoulders. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here." But just as he held her close, warming her tiny hands in his own, a dark figure emerged from the alley. A man, his eyes wild with desperation. He locked eyes with Daniel, and suddenly, the night became even more dangerous, and what happened next changed Daniel's life forever. Stay tuned, because this story is just beginning. Daniel's heartbeat quickened as the man stepped closer, his heavy boots crunching against the cold pavement. The girl in his arms whimpered, burying her face in his chest. He could feel her tiny fingers clutching the fabric of his worn-out sweater, as if holding on for dear life. The man's eyes darted between Daniel and the child, his face partially hidden under the hood of his jacket. There was something off about him. His stance, the way his fingers twitched at his sides. "That kid," the man muttered, his voice rough. "She ain't yours." Daniel felt his body tense. "I found her alone," he said firmly. "She needs help." The man let out a low chuckle, taking another step forward. "That's none of your business, old man." Daniel could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the way his hands trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Addiction? Desperation? Whatever it was, Daniel knew one thing. He couldn't let this man take the girl. He took a step back, glancing around the empty street, searching for someone, anyone. But it was late, and the city had already turned its back on people like him. No one was coming. "I think you should walk away," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his bones. The man narrowed his eyes. "That's funny. I was about to tell you the same thing." In an instant, he lunged. Instinct took over. Daniel twisted his body, shielding the girl as he stumbled back. The man grabbed at his arm, yanking hard, trying to tear the child away. The little girl screamed. Years of living on the streets had sharpened Daniel's reflexes. He wasn't strong, but he was quick. He used the momentum of the struggle to throw his weight forward, sending both of them crashing onto the pavement. The man cursed, scrambling to his feet, but Daniel was already up, gripping the girl tightly. A car turned the corner, its headlights slicing through the darkness. For a split second, the man hesitated. Then, without another word, he spun on, his heels, and disappeared into the shadows. Daniel stood there, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His hands were shaking. The girl was crying softly against his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's over." But he knew that wasn't true. Who was that man? Why was the girl alone? And more importantly, what had he just gotten himself into? The next morning, Daniel sat on the steps of an old diner, watching as the city slowly came to life. He had barely slept. The little girl, who told him her name was Lily, was curled up beside him, wrapped in his coat. She hadn't spoken much, just clung to him, scared and unsure. Daniel had tried to ask her where she lived, where her parents were, but all she had done was shake her head, her eyes filling with tears. He needed help. But where could he go? The shelters were overcrowded, and the police, they didn't always take kindly to people like him. He sighed, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Just then, the door to the diner swung open, and a woman stepped out holding a cup of coffee. She paused when she saw them, her eyes softening. "You okay, old-timer?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. He didn't like asking for favors. But this wasn't about him. "This little one needs help," he admitted. The woman glanced at Lily, then back at him. She nodded. "Come inside. Let's figure this out." As Daniel carried Lily into the warmth of the diner, he had no idea that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Because miles away, in a world Daniel had never been part of, a story was about to unfold, one that would soon catch the attention of a man named Elon Musk. The warmth of the diner wrapped around Daniel and Lily like a quiet embrace. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold streets they had just come from. The woman, whose name was Maria, led them to a booth near the window and handed them a menu. "You both look like you could use a hot meal," she said with a gentle smile. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't used to kindness, at least not without something expected in return. But this wasn't about him. He glanced at Lily, who was staring at the menu with wide, hungry eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. As they ate, Maria sat across from them, her gaze filled with curiosity and concern. "So, what's the story?" she asked, her voice low. Daniel sighed. He explained how he had found Lily, how she had been alone in the cold, and how the man had tried to take her. He didn't know what the man wanted or where Lily had come from, only that she had been terrified. Maria's expression grew serious. "We should call someone," she said. "The police, maybe child services." Lily stiffened, gripping Daniel's arm tightly. Her small voice finally broke through. "No," she whispered. "Please." Daniel looked down at her, his heart twisting. Whatever had happened to this little girl, she was more afraid of being taken away than anything else. Maria sighed. Okay, she said gently. "Let's figure something else out." She got up and disappeared into the back of the diner. A few moments later, she returned with a phone in her hand, a strange look on her face. "You're not going to believe this," she said, setting the phone on the table. "Your story, it's already out there." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Maria turned the screen toward him. A news article was open, the headline making his stomach drop. "Homeless man saves lost child from abduction. Community rallies for a hero." There was a blurry photo of him carrying Lily, taken by someone who must have been watching from afar. The story had spread overnight. People were talking. Some were even searching for him, wanting to help. Daniel's hands shook as he scrolled through the comments. Strangers offering food, shelter, jobs, and then at the bottom of the page, a single comment stood out. "This man deserves a second chance. Let's find him. I want to help." Elon Musk. Daniel blinked, certain he was imagining things. Maria let out a low whistle. "Now that," she said, "is something you don't see every day." Before he could process what was happening, the bell over the diner door chimed. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, looking around before his eyes landed on Daniel. "You're Daniel, right?" the man asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "I work with Elon Musk," the man continued. "He saw your story. He wants to meet you." The world seemed to tilt. Daniel felt Lily's tiny fingers squeeze his hand, grounding him in reality. This couldn't be real. People like him didn't get noticed. They didn't get second chances. And yet, here he was. A week later, Daniel stood inside a sleek, futuristic office, his hands still rough from years of hardship. Across from him sat Elon Musk himself, casually dressed, his piercing gaze studying Daniel with quiet curiosity. "I read about what you did," Elon said, leaning forward. "You didn't have to help that girl. Most people would have walked away." Daniel swallowed. "I couldn't." Elon nodded, as if that was the answer he had been hoping for. "I believe in people who take action, no matter their circumstances," he said, "and I want to help you get back on your feet." Daniel could barely breathe. "A home," Elon continued, "a job, a chance to start over." The words felt unreal, like some impossible dream. But the sincerity in Elon's eyes told Daniel this was real. This was happening. Tears burned the back of Daniel's eyes as he glanced at Lily, who was sitting beside him, happily playing with a small toy someone had given her. She was safe now. She had a future. And for the first time in years, so did he. Months later, Daniel stood outside his new apartment, looking up at the clear blue sky. He had a job now, working with a foundation that helped homeless individuals get back on their feet. He had stability, a life, a purpose, and most importantly, he had Lily. Through the efforts of many people, they had found her family, a kind, loving aunt who had been searching for her. Now, Lily visited Daniel every week, running into his arms with the same bright smile she had the first time he had saved her. He wasn't just a man on the streets anymore. He was someone who mattered, someone who had been given a second chance. He sat on a park bench watching Lily play. A stranger walked by and tossed him a small nod. "I know you," the man said with a smile. "You're the guy who saved that little girl." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah," he said, feeling a warmth spread in his chest. "She saved me," and for the first time in a long time, he truly believed it.